again, so many, if we were to do a mind map just now, there'll be so many of these arrows going in so many different directions, part of it. I mean, I want to anchor actually on one of the things, which is also about, I mean, the whole connection between change in life and change at work. But really looking at those small changes, a lot of the times, I think one of the triggers that happens is that while life has its own earth-shattering changes that happen, uh, at work, it's thought of as even bigger. So one of the things that's always said is, like, I remember reading this in, I think, UN Semple, a guy's blog that I had just come across. And he said, unleash the Trojan mice. Don't do the big things or spend loads of money. Set small, nimble things running and see where they head. So it's really looking at those small, well-focused changes, introduced very subtly, unconspicuously, like generally like the mice, just to let it go, and not something which is radical. And this, I remember reading about this person, Matthew Ogle, who's currently the VP product of this thing called DistroKid. And he used to work with Spotify before. He was one of the head of product development of this thing called EcoNest, where he had spent 10 years refining a music recommendation engine. And in 2015, he got a job with Spotify, and his music recommendation engine was now going to be sent to tens of millions of users in Spotify. And one of his first few tasks was to create a product called Discover Weekly, which is a playlist of 30 songs which the user would have never heard on the platform, but they were based on the user's listening patterns. These were being recommended. So they would get this playlist every Monday morning or something like that. And so they created this and they sent it out. And then they realized that there was a bug in the system. So some of the songs that the users had heard before also slipped into that. So they said, oh my God, okay, there's a bug in the system. So they rushed to fix the bug so that the playlist only contained the new songs. And when they did that, the popularity of the product plummeted. And they reintroduced the bug and discovered that in the process, they discovered that the users actually desired some familiarity.
Yeah.
And the product's popularity went up again. So, I mean, linking this to way we look at change on the big and the large thing, to the Trojan mind stuff, to the big bang thing, what do you think are some of the, sweeping or non-sweeping changes that can work? Again, linking it back to our conversation about, how can we make it organically part of everything that we do?
And I love this challenge that you just opened. And while listening to you, the first thing that came to my mind is this is probably one of the best illustrations of it is this and that, not this or that. And one thing that I see over and over and over again is that organizations, they buckle up for big shifts and for turnarounds and for transformations, and almost entirely fail to stay as mindful and intentional with small changes that occur every single day. And there's a wonderful quote from Hemingway. I have a soft spot for Hemingway. So I have a feeling that throughout this conversation, all the loves of my life will get part of this conversation. So in The Sun Also Rises, there's a bit of a dialogue between two characters, and one asks the other, so how did you go bankrupt? And the answer is a change work gem. Gradually, then suddenly. And that means that small things pile up, and then there's a tipping point where their compounded effect just becomes this big thing. It's almost as we have been completely oblivious to things happening right in front of our eyes until we can ignore them no more. Yeah. So I think that is one. And actually, this is something that got me thinking about change while I was knitting, because that's my mindfulness practice. I knit and I crochet. I have this glamorous inner grandmother inside. I keep her happy with ice cream and yarn. So I realized that this is what happens, stitch by stitch and row by row. You don't necessarily pay attention to it, but there comes a moment when I pick up my project and it feels heavy in my lap. And that's the suddenly part. So that's the first call out I would make, don't get entirely focused, almost tunnel visioned with the big upheavals. Because what really fuels resistance to change and what really fuels change fatigue are the small things that happen every day. That is what chips away at people's resilience and patience and headspace and heart space. Yeah. The other thing that you said there, I really love this. Heard this before, but I will make sure that I will pick it up and use it. I would say, use horses, ponies, mice, whatever. Maybe the only thing that gives me a little bit of an unease is the Trojan part. Yeah, but I know it's afternoon for you, but for me it's morning. So maybe my filters haven't woken up yet. But I was delivering a few workshops over the past days at work, and we kept talking about how we communicate for change. And there is this wonderful model originally designed by Chip and Dale Heath, called the Rider-Elephant Path. Now, the disclaimer there is that I have no idea why the elephant is the animal that we most pick on in business, but you gotta love an elephant. And they said that the best communication model, especially for change, is Rider-Elephant Path. Now, some of the people, listening or watching us, they might have heard about it through a slight adaptation into Head, Heart, Hands. I personally prefer the original because it's so visually striking, the difference in both size and agility between the rider and the elephant. Now, the rider stands for our rational part. Yeah, that's where we need facts and figures. That's where we need the business case. The elephant is our emotional part. Yeah, it's our heart. It's how we feel about it. And the practical is how we go about implementing it. Now, one of the pitfalls that I see over and over again is that many people assume that the practical is part of the rational. So if people understand why they need to change, automatically in their head, they have the project plan. And then I ask them how many times after people are absolutely on board, both rationally and emotionally, they still say, we don't have time for this until next year. We didn't think that it was this much amount of work. And I think the practical hides many mice, back to your point. What do you think about it? I'm sure you've seen so many things happening. What are your horses, donkeys, ponies, and mice?
I'm going to stick to elephants. And it's like, I mean, absolutely. I think in what I find in my work also is that actually who's driving the elephant, who's riding the elephant is very important. There was this book about messengers, who do we listen to and why, which
Yeah,
talks
great
about
book.
amazing book. It really made me think about, I mean, some of the hard part of the messaging, which is your, things which are given, and the soft part of the messaging part of it. And I think wherever we have had top management driving things, and that's where I'm saying the rider part of it is also key. But also taking it in a very embracing quality, embracing change in a very personal way. So there was this book called Elephant Catchers, which is key lessons for breakthrough growth. This is a person called Subrato Bakchi, who used to work in this Indian IT company called Wipro. Talks about his days at Wipro. And he says that when Wipro had initiated Six Sigma, the company chose Motorola to train the senior management on the know-how. And one of the guiding principles of Six Sigma, and I'm not an expert, but is he says is about embracing quality in a very personal way. Asim Premji, who was heading Wipro, he decided that he will demonstrate and role model it in some way. So he said that meetings are my product as service, and the participants in the meetings are my customers. So at the end of every meeting, Premji started giving out feedback forms that rated the quality of the meetings in various parameters. The forms were then returned to mission quality, where they sat and analyzed it, and then went back to Premji to talk about the defect levels of the meeting, did a root cause analysis so that the meetings could be measured, analyzed, controlled, improved as per TQM principles and all that. And the exercise, to your initial conversation, when we talked about the curiosity aspect, the exercises absolutely caused curiosity among the teams. And it drew a lot of chuckles at the beginning. But soon the entire organization got the message that at Wipro, quality was taken extremely seriously and it cannot be compromised in any area of work. So in this, that change, which was caused by that personal commitment of the leader, really drove that point home. So a lot of the times, I think when we want to communicate about change in organizations, and this is something that I see, is there's a top-down thing, but it's an announcement. Nobody is living it. There is no role modeling. And then that is where that dissonance between, what I'm seeing is so clear that I can't, it's overshadowing, it's so loud that it's overshadowing what I'm hearing, as they say. I mean, I'm paraphrasing that, but you get what I mean. So really walking the talk on when you're talking about small change, big change, whatever it is. And I think one of the reasons that happens is that, especially with the senior management, and I'd like to hear your take on it also, is that they've been working on this change project, this change idea for a very long time. So it's playing like a record on their head. We talk about curse of knowledge, right? So when they actually then come and they want to talk about change and drive it down, there's a lot of content which is not said because it's playing in their mind. It's the thing of imagining. I'm imagining this song in my head. I can imagine who is singing. I can imagine what costumes they were wearing, how they were, what stage I saw it in. But it's not connecting to the other person because they can't visualize it. So there's that little bit of that curse of knowledge aspect that comes in on the communication piece. And that's where I feel there is like that gap, which stories and organizations can really bridge.
Yeah. You mentioned two things that sparked an idea, and I just want to make a conversation post it, and then come back to what you said about misperceptions and misassumptions among not just senior leaders, but about people in a position to lead change, and they, they have the feeling that it's so clear and it's been discussed for months. So we will take a few minutes around that. But again, the conversation posted around Six Sigma and around productivity as a business philosophy and change. Now, back to your question. There's a thing that is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And that basically says that we are all distributed across a spectrum of cognitive bias. At one end, the people who know least about a subject, they tend to consider themselves experts and they overestimate themselves because, ironically, they lack the very knowledge needed for them to accurately self-assess. At the other end of the spectrum, we have the experts, or the people who have been enjoying privileged exposure to information. And they make the assumption that, everybody got the information, the same volume, the same quality at the same time. And even one step further, they all decoded it and interpreted it and made sense of it pretty much the same way. And there you have the exponential confusion within the organization. So it is very, very common that we would hear someone leading change saying, I don't understand why it's taking so long. We've been discussing this for 3 months. You and maybe a handful of other people, not the 2,539, people within the organization that need to actually work towards those changes. So that is one. The second one, and I see this quite often, it is so painful and so frustrating. So there you are, full disclosure. When I hear in change work, leaders or managers saying, oh, there's nothing new, we don't need that town hall or Zoom call or all hands, or we don't need that meeting. Those meetings are not just for you to download content on others. Those meetings are for you to listen. Yeah. So the fact that we don't have anything new to communicate, that might be an incredible message of stability and reassurance. Yeah. And it's a wonderful opportunity for you to listen and let the organization do the speaking. So these are some of the things that came to my mind when you said about how leaders tend to assume communication. There's one amazing quote about communication that I absolutely love. And it says, I used to think that communication was key until I understood that it's comprehension. You can communicate all you want, but if the other person doesn't comprehend you, it's just silent chaos.
Totally. I mean, it absolutely connects, because I think storytelling is that necessary part of that internalization. Through the stories that we create. Sometimes change is talked about in an intellectual level, whereas it needs to happen through emotions and through an incremental level. So a change is actually an emotional experience, which is based on logic. So, and the emotional element is really, really necessary part of it.